We are so excited to be in this space with you all and to be talking about, what does it mean to do climate justice on the ground with organizations. And we'll be having this discussion that's really hyper-local to Philly, but thinking about how businesses everywhere can really contribute to climate disaster relief efforts and preparedness. And so I'm really excited today to be here with these three individuals who will talk a little bit more about themselves, but we have Rick Olmos, Nilda Ruiz, and Will Gonzalez from CEBA, and I think that we're gonna have a really exciting discussion to start, but then we'll have plenty of opportunity for Q&A. And so please feel free to gather up your questions so that we can make this an engaging conversation with not just us, but with you all. And so one of the things that was really important for us when we came up with this idea for the discussion was thinking about the impact of Hurricane Maria in 2017. And so it really devastated the island. It took out the electrical grid. There was, an immense amount of catastrophic damage on the island. And our people were suffering because of this climate event. And so Philadelphia, we all know, is a city with one of the highest populations of Puerto Ricanos. And so we really felt that this was an opportunity to spring into action. I know on the ground, me as an individual, I felt that. And it was great to see organizations really thinking along the lines of the same way. The difference was in this moment, before that, there had not been, this was an untapped resource. There was not a coalition of organizations, activists, government, people working together towards a common cause. And so it was really important that there was this urgency and precision with these organizations who formed this coalition, Unidos PAPR. And so what we know and with what we shared at the closing yesterday is that communities who are most impacted, most marginalized, are most impacted by climate injustice, and this is what was happening with our, Puerto Rican community. And so I'm gonna give each individual to talk about themselves a little bit and share about their work, but when you all decided that this effort needed to be taken on, you knew locally that action had to be taken. Tell us about yourself, your role in this coalition, and why you believed it had to get done. And then we'll go in order.
Okay. My name is Rick Olmos. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer for Centro Hispano in Redding. During the hurricane, I was actually the Director of External Affairs for APM, Asociación Puertorriqueños en Marcha. And because of the hurricane, I got a second part of my title, External Affairs and Special Projects, thanks to Nilda Ruiz.
Yeah, I'm Nilda Ruiz, and I'm the President and CEO of Asociación Puertorriqueños en Marcha. Actually, we started preparing with Irma. We just heard that this horrible hurricane was going to come. So we all got together, and we have a large concentration of Puerto Ricans here in Philadelphia. So, of course, we're all tied. We all have families to Puerto Rico. So we started preparing, and then it wasn't that bad. And then Hurricane Maria came. So by then, we had already started the initiation of all getting together. And we just thought it's going to hit, and it's going to hit hard, and we need to be ready. And what was really beautiful is that we all the organizations came together, and for the first time, I saw it was all hands on deck. Nobody was, this is my organization, I'm going to take credit. It was like, whatever needs to be done, we're going to get it done. And it was a really, it just happened very organically. And we just knew it needed to happen. So, and we'll talk more, during the presentation.
Buenas tardes. My name is Will Gonzalez. I'm the Executive Director of CEBA, a coalition building organization in the Latino community of Philadelphia. At the time, CEBA was a very small coalition, 4 organizations working very low key. But they say crisis creates opportunities, and I think crisis also brings people together, and to see this group of nonprofits, political leaders. I mean, you know how human beings are. We always have divisions of different political factions or whatever. All that was set aside because of that crisis in Puerto Rico, and people started working together. And then the dream of creating a collective of the Latino organizations that transcended a particular crisis materialized. And we're blessed that today we're the backbone for what's the Ceiba Latino Equitable Development Collective, which is still growing, but it's a way to bring the top nonprofits to work together to address issues in our community. So we learned a lot from that working together, and we're building on that.
Thank you so much. And so I want to jump right in and thinking about looking back on the work during that time. What do you feel were some of the characteristics of coalition building that was crucial in that moment that you want to recognize and share as a best practice? Like, what were some of the things that you realized working together in terms of crisis creating opportunities that was like, this was the piece that was really important for us?
Well, I will say it was very heartening to feel, to see these groups that were, a lot of the groups are competing for the same dollar on an otherwise basis, but all agendas were dropped to one agenda, and that was to help the community that was coming from Puerto Rico. And so that was really what was, I think, taken forward. And one of the key efforts that we noticed is rather than have each organization try to do their own fund drive, their own, this group came together and created a larger way of looking at and asking the question of what is needed before we start taking in stuff. A lot of organizations, small organizations, decided to do like fund drives and gathering clothes, so they're getting used clothes and so forth without asking, how are we going to get this to Puerto Rico? And so it ended up that they had a bunch of stuff that they didn't know what to do with. This group came together and they worked with what are the next steps, because we had people like Nilda, people like Will, and in the leadership roles that were able to say, not just look at A, but they're looking A, B, C, all the way to Z to be able to know what's next and what's needed. And we were also hidden because we didn't know everything. Yeah. There are groups that were like the PA VOAD that exists that came to us and said, hey, we have this, we can help you. And at first we were, of course, saying, who are these white people coming telling us what to do? This is a Latino groups. We don't need the white people coming in. But we found out quickly that they knew much more than we did on certain things. Yeah. We knew how to get the people to the table. They knew how to get people beyond the table. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and many of us work, but we don't do first response, right? We work with families. They come to us. This was very, very unique. And what we found is that every agency has something different that they could. So, of course, us with the name Asociación Puertorriqueños en Marcha, all the Puerto Ricans that were coming in would immediately come to us. So the Office of Emergency Services asked us if we would join them as these families were coming in. Right. Then our line got really long and they put us in the back because they weren't able, FEMA wasn't able to do what they needed to do. But then as we got families, we realized that none of us had the capacity to deal with these families as they were coming. So when they came in, we would help them if they had. There were so many issues in Puerto Rico with the entangled titles. So people came and FEMA couldn't help them. We were able to help a lot of them. We were able to help them to go to Esperanza to get housing counseling, and we also do housing counseling. We helped some, they helped some. Congreso had vouchers that they were able to give. But it was really complicated because we had whole families coming to us. Yeah. And usually when migrants come here, they'll send someone and then they'll see how it goes and then they bring the rest of the family. Right. We had the whole family and we're looking at them like, where do we place them? What do we do? And we learned so much. One, if you're a US citizen and you don't speak English, there's no services for you. So all those migrants that are coming from Venezuela and whatever, they're going to get more services than our Puerto Rican families got when they came because they were citizens and there were just no services for families like that. But everybody working together and just knowing that not any one of us has all the solutions. So we really learned how to work together and tag team with each other. And we were able to house them, get them furniture, get them food. I mean, APM hired 10 of these evacuees that came. So we were able to get them jobs. Some of them were professionals, but they didn't know any English. So getting them English as a second language was another challenge. But
no, and I think the key was everybody checked their ego at the door. I think also it was a collaborative not only of the nonprofits, but also private businesses and government to a degree. And I know one business person, he knew how to deal with logistics. That's how they made their living, so they helped us with logistics. Some of the businesses, again, we were still thinking of how to get material aid across, an ocean almost, and that had some challenges. Some of you know about the Jones Act, about how you can ship between two U.S. ports and what that does. And then information was important. I think another thing of the spirit of the times, this is what, 16, 17, I think 2017. We were going through a political firestorm at the time.
Yeah.
And so, so we were already on edge. The island was on edge. And I think that was another reason why organizations knew how important it was for us and to come together to help in that crisis, because the government was throwing paper towels at them instead of the aid that was needed. So I think the role of business was important. And we appreciate that. And also, let me just, one more thing, because it was a long-standing thing. Nilda talked about the FEMA, because again, despite somebody throwing paper towels, FEMA was there. Right. But then FEMA is a logistical, administrative, bureaucratic thing. And so a couple of businesses, and I don't know if they're B Corps, but Santander Bank and the Vanguard Group, they got their legal departments to work with the Hispanic Bar Association to do FEMA legal clinics. And sometimes it's as simple as filling out a form correctly or including this or that. And we were supposed to do one, and we ended up doing 4. And then we got called in to do one in Reading and one in Lancaster. So again, the business came through because again, we did not have that legal capacity that these big corporations had with their legal departments coming in. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think you were going to ask how companies can.
I was. Yeah, y'all are ahead of the game. I love it.
Do you want me to wait for you? I wanted
Yeah,
to.
I mean, part of what I wanted to just set the stage for is that Rick said PA VOAD, that's volunteers organizing around disaster. And so I think that just in terms of mobilization, they tend to be on the ground, and that was a relationship that was built through trust building. Really pushing back on the white savior complex with that relationship, but being able to bring them in so that they could help you with infrastructure, I'm sure was important. And then just to go back as an individual that has lived in Philadelphia and knows all of your organizations, it was incredible to see y'all just put those differences aside and be like, we're going to do this fine, and this is important work. And I think that was really a crucial moment for Philadelphians, for Puerto Ricanos in Philadelphia, to see that work happening. But please know that continue.
Yeah. Now, and on that same line, and that's where the Greater Philadelphia Long-Term Recovery Committee was started. And it's the first time that is done in a place where the disaster did not happen. Okay. So it was really great. And then part of that coalition wasn't only the nonprofits, but FEMA was there, HUD was there, the finance agency, CED, the state. So it was all hands on deck, and it was really great to see. So the other thing that happened is that corporations got together. So there's a businessman here called Mike Miller, who's married to a Puerto Rican. He has Inertia and company, and what they do is they ship like Johnson & Johnson products out to Puerto Rico. So what he did is he stopped all of his operations, and he allowed us to use those ships to take goods out there. And we had so much stuff donated that at one point I just didn't know where to house it. And I found out at that time Texas was also having issues, and they were selling them like a bottle for like $12. And I said, if I don't get to send this to Puerto Rico, I'm sending it to Texas. They're getting it free. We got it free. They're going to get it free. So so we were able to send that. And then in Puerto Rico, we had another Banco Alimentos and Ayuda Mi Isla, which is a nonprofit. And the wife of Victor Negron also had a relationship with the Major League Baseball. And they were able to open up a warehouse in Carolina. And so the ships came in through Mayagüez because everything was being bottlenecked in San Juan. So they were able to go there, pick up all those goods, and then they drove around the middle of the island out to like Utuado and some of the other places. So the coordination of the businesses back and forth was great. And American Airlines, whenever they had any extra space, they would call us or they would call the Salvation Army, which, by the way, I'm very grateful because while other agencies left, the Salvation Army is still there, and they worked with us throughout the time. So then, if we had generators, we would send them, and everything would be at no cost. So, the business community is really important, and not just, the money, but just things like this, helping us use their resources, because we would have never had the infrastructure to be able to send all that money and goods out.
One of the key things that Neil brought up that people don't realize, the hurricane hit Puerto Rico. So when it comes down to the funding that, for assistance, it was FEMA, it was HUD, because that's national, and Puerto Rico is U.S. citizens. But PEMA, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management, did not have anything for us because it did not happen in Pennsylvania. Right. There was no city emergency funding because it didn't happen here. Right. So anything that we did get from the state was leftover money from grants that they shut down, and they had extra money, so they gave it to us with all the bureaucracy that they came with. So we ended up not using but like 10% of the money that the state tried to give us, because it was 100 pages worth of paperwork for per dollar. So it just wasn't worth it.
But their role was one of, because what had happened is there had been a migration. These were climate change evacuees. And so they were coming to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, for some reason, is one of the top destinations for Puerto Ricans. There's now, I think, more Puerto Ricans living outside of Puerto Rico, an island 100 miles long, 35 wide, than there is in Puerto Rico. And correct me with my math, I think it's 4 million outside and 6 million.
We're 9 million strong.
Yeah, I know. So it's just to show, and then that moved some more people coming to Pennsylvania and to Philadelphia. So I think that's working with the state helped those families connect. And there were some challenges. It wasn't always rosy working with government, and that's why one of the lessons is to prepare ahead of time, learn about regulations and opportunities, not only for disasters that happen here, but in case of migration taking place. One example was we knew that there was a presidential, whenever there's at the time, there was a regulation in terms of public housing here that said, whenever there's a presidentially declared disaster and the evacuees from those areas come to Philadelphia, they had preference to some housing vouchers. Unfortunately, that was what was written in the regulations, but it took us a lot of time and a lot of sweat to get them to implement some of these things. So that was a shameful part for Philadelphia. They went ahead and then changed it after that, but it took us some work. But again, we were working as a group, and we pushed some things through, and we were able to get about 400 people. No, but more than that. There were about
250 families.
Yes,
that
house.
APM directly, but there were 2,000 from FEMA, and this is unprecedented. We were able to get 52 vouchers for the Housing Authority, which is unheard of for the Latino community.
Right.
And the first time we told the mayor, so he gave us 5 vouchers, and we all looked at each other like, 5 vouchers? So we could only send 5 families. So we were like, what do we do? So we sent 20, and they call us, we only asked for 5. And I said, well, we don't make the decision, you all make the decision. You interview them. So there were some funny times in that.
There's also a situation that came up with the, how we were talking about regulations and so forth. We had a lot of, like Neil said, professionals that came because of the hurricane in the first wave, nurses, professors, police officers, who they spoke Spanish, but they had their certification. They were U.S. citizens with certifications, but in Pennsylvania, those certifications are not recognized. Right. Other states recognized them, but they were not recognized here, so there was no reciprocity between Pennsylvania and Puerto Rico. And that's something that Will was, with all of his law friends, trying to get that changed. I don't think that ever did.
There's still work to be done, and we're looking at education in terms of reciprocity, in a time when there's a need for teachers, the ability for Pennsylvania to catch up with other states' jurisdictions that recognize the reciprocity. So work to be done in 2023.
And I'll just, for a little bit of background framing for those of you who are trying to understand the logistical barriers to this process is, if you're not aware that, the 1920 Jones Act requires that all goods that are shipped between U.S. ports are transported by U.S. vessels. So it literally has to be on American-built ships, crewed by U.S. citizens, and it has to be American-owned shipping companies. So the logistical challenges that were being faced for just literally shipping generators and things over there is because of a federally racist policy that continues to impact Puerto Rico. So I just wanted to say, that is the biggest issue that created all of this need for this coalition building and for the actual businesses to come and step in to literally walk around this red tape bureaucracy that we're talking about. And so this really meant that there was an issue, a bottleneck of the outpouring of donations, because we have so many Puerto Ricanos in the United States, in the States, that were like, hey, how do I contribute? Can I give you things? And y'all are like, well, how do we get this over there, right? That was literally the logistical challenge at the moment. Everyone wanted to help, wanted to send things over, but this policy really was a detriment for this to be a more streamlined process. And so I know that that's part of what you were thinking about when you were tapping into businesses, but were there, and clearly the waivers were an issue as well, so another, policy issue. But are there any other things that you think emerged from that process in terms of policy that you had to address in your work?
One thing is some of the monies that we tried to get from the state required that every apartment that was going to be rented out had to be checked for lead paint, and it had to be done by an inspector with lead paint certification. And that would cost, $500 for that inspection. So I did some searching on the web, and I got certified for lead paint inspection personally. And I went to inspect every apartment from APM to make sure that those apartments were taken care of. And that was thanks to my boss that let me take the online class. And so I'm lead paint certified.
That's why he said special projects.
Special projects added right there.
No, that's a good point.
But the key, where you were mentioning about the boat, the ships, think about all the nice, inexpensive items we get from China from Walmart. Those items cannot be shipped to Puerto Rico. They have to come to the United States, transferred over to a United States ship, and then down to Puerto Rico. So that $5 shirt is now a $20 shirt because of the extra cost of the fuel. The now a union ship from the United States. So even Walmart, milk, anything like that is going to be 4, 5, 10 times the price.
Yes.
So now there's 9 million Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania and only 6 million in Puerto Rico. So because they can afford to live here.
1 million in Pennsylvania, 9 million throughout the country, and 3 million in Puerto Rican.
And then thinking about the migration, because I think that part of what we were understanding, right? This was also around the time of the Puerto Rican Day Parade in Philadelphia, right? There was just this understanding or this feeling that, our family members were there, our family members were being impacted. How do we get them to come here so that they can be safe, knowing or feeling like there was going to be some issues ahead for them? And when we're thinking about climate migration, right, and what U.S. cities, what companies here need to be preparing for in terms of their communities, because we're going to see more of this, right? I think that we're all pretty, it's safe to say that, which is unfortunate. But how do you think, or what do you think is important for organizations, government, businesses to do to start preparing for what this climate migration will continue to look like?
There's a lot to do, and the key is the information, right? Information not only about the bureaucracy of migrations and the challenges, but also addressing issues of disinformation and misinformation. Finally, I think very few people still believe that this is a hoax, right? The climate change is for real. I think that said, there's still, especially in urban communities like Philadelphia, and especially in the areas that we work, we're going to have some serious issues with heat coming, and how do our families deal with that, and how do we help our communities deal with that? And then, of course, you know, those closer to the water's edge, there'll be more flooding, et cetera, et cetera. And so we still, I think, have a lot to, you know, I'll hold the mirror up to myself. We still have a lot to reckon with, because at the same time, we're trying to address issues of without climate change that are challenges in our community. But now you're throwing that in, so that's one more element. And so I think, you know, again, nonprofits, government, business need to start figuring out ways to work together to address that challenge. And it's not just in lowering our carbon footprint, but also in how do we deal with the unique needs that are going to come up because of this climate change.
Yeah, and preparing is not just preparing for there, but also here. Because what happens is when, like you said, the Puerto Rican parade, we started, I never thought ever in my life I would be with a bucket asking for money. And Rick says, okay, I'm going to do that for you, but here, you're going to hold the bucket. And anyway, we're not going to talk about some of the ridiculous things he had me do out there. But there I was with a bucket asking for money. But I was really happy that we did. And we fundraised almost $500,000. Then when families started coming here, we said, well, but we told everybody that this was for Puerto Rico. So also keeping the fidelity of what you're telling people you're going to do was a real challenge. So that's how the Greater Philadelphia Long-Term Recovery started. That money and that effort was for the Puerto Ricans coming here. We kept the 500 for going there. And just to give you some of the things that we did this little flyer, and I brought it with me, but we were able to help 2,000 individual contributions. 25,000 was in food partners, 35,000 was from the Salvation Army to Puerto Rico and food. We gave 15,000 for transportation and goods. 50,000 went for waterproof solar lanterns that we sent over. The PICO staff raised 15,000 and we were able to send that. 99,000 of that money went for roof tarps and family and water filter systems. One of the things that happened there too, this is really sad, a lot of the livestock died because of the floods or whatever. So what they did is they were near the waterways. So what they did is they buried them there close without realizing now they just contaminated all of the water. So, and then the mosquitoes, all those mosquitoes, it's a hot place. So we had a group of women that were making nets and they started a business. So we sent them money. We had the doctors sin barreras. So we had a lot of doctors that were volunteers and they went out there and they actually went into the little towns and went into people's homes to check up on the elderly. And we gave 40,000 to that effort. And 5,000 went to local farms, another 5,000. Anyway, the list goes on, but all of that money went directly, you know, to Puerto Rico to help the families there. And we know it's going to continue because Fiona, right now, that hit the Southwest, Cabo Rojo, that Hormiguero, which was the area that was not hit by Hurricane Maria. The other challenge is because climate change is happening so much. This tragedy happens and boom, next one. And then you forget about the last one. So while we were, you know, working with Puerto Rico, now Texas got hit, North Carolina. And so, and you know, when people are hurting, they're all hurting. So, but it's like, how do you keep it aware? And we continue to work in Puerto Rico because, of course, we knew that Texas, North Carolina, they were going to get the attention. The government was going to come to their aid. We weren't so, well, we know Puerto Rico just did not get that type of attention.
One of the keys that when you mentioned about how businesses could help, a lot of, you know, with the funding, of course, that's huge. You know, having a business send a check, that will help in the best way possible. But there are other difficulties that we had, such as gathering information to the families that are coming. You know, FEMA got there, FEMA didn't want to share it with us. Right. So we at APM were really good at doing casework. So we had a case paperwork intake form that we did for every person that came through the door. But we also had to make sure to have them sign a waiver to be able to share We had now their information. I needed a waiver to be able to share it with Congreso, with SEBA. But, talking to computer companies to say, hey, can you guys provide some software for us to be able to share this information and it be safe instead of just having it on a file folder and then making a copy and sending it over. So that is something that, looking to the forward, computer companies can help us in different ways. It would help if Michael Dell would send 20 tablets for every nonprofit to have for emergency use for those kind of situations, because the key word there is we were nonprofit. We don't have extra money to be able to pay for special projects. Use your term.
Lead certifications.
We don't have that extra money, but we still are going to take up the mantle. We're not going to say, sorry, we can't help you. We don't have the money. All the people that work at a nonprofit work there because it's a passion. And they're already putting in 24 hours a day. So, we don't need to get as much sleep, a couple of days, but we're going to continue to help our community. And I am a Texan. I am from Texas. My mom is Spanish. My dad is Native American. I'm not Puerto Rican, but they adopted me as soon as I got here. So I consider myself part of the Puerto Rican community.
At the end of the day, Latinos, we're all brothers and sisters.
Exactly.
No, I appreciate that, because I think that part of what is really important for this conversation and for the companies that are here is there is always a need, and then sometimes with climate disaster, there's sort of like an urgency of need where everyone's like, wait, this is happening, what do I do? Can I help? What can I do? And I think what the panel is saying and what we're proposing is that we should be having conversations to prepare now for what happens when it happens, right? Let's start the process, let's strategize, let's figure out if we understand that, there's certain supplies that are in need or in demand whenever a climate disaster hits, whether it's in your backyard or somewhere else. How can we start the strategy of being able to incorporate and integrate businesses that can be helpful on the ground that are looking to do this kind of work, right? So it's not just about disaster relief in terms of recovery, but in terms of preparedness, what needs to take place. So I wasn't sure if any of you had other things to add.
I am now in Berks County in Reading, and we started the Berks Community Organizations Assisting a Disaster, and we changed it specifically from volunteer organizations to community organizations, because when you say volunteer, then government can't be part of it. But by saying community organizations, that allows any organization, including businesses, to join and be part of it. So we've started working and bringing organizations in together and saying, this is what we are. We're here to prepare. I've used some of the forms that we created at the Greater Reading, the Greater Philly long-term, and we're changing them up for Berks. But we're also asking those organizations that are for-profit to pitch in a little bit. We're talking to the government to say, hey, when you're doing your budget, be sure and include a line item for the COAD. They made me a co-chair, so I'm bringing this up. Those of you on the cameras, if you want to send some money in, any one of these organizations will be happy to take a little check. We have Venmo, we have PayPal.
One of the biggest lessons is that it's not easy giving away money. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that there's not a duplication. Because unfortunately, whenever there's a disaster, there are people that will take advantage of it, right? But if you start preparing before, at least having an idea of people, and for the Puerto Rican community that has a high concentration, and I know that a lot of Puerto Ricans are now going to Texas, so for those of you that are Texans, you're getting a lot of our people there because there's a lot of jobs there. But start thinking about, how do you help people there, but you're going to get people in droves, and how do you help people also that are coming to your city?
And again, the preparing, and I was a little harsh by saying, for example, APM is doing a great job at thinking about climate change and their housing development.
Yes.
Because again, it's not only about staying cool, but the cost of heating, the cost of staying cool, electricity. So incorporating those, because you can't, what building materials you use, et cetera, et cetera. So that now has to be part. And I think what we need to do is start thinking, putting that in every decision we make, putting it in the equation. And then I think also when it comes to policy, like Rick was saying, making sure that the government has a line item for these type of things, but also in terms of where are they building? Are you building in floodplains? You know, please, you know, getting businesses, also banks, to say, you know, don't support these type of projects that are going to, in the long term, going to lead to flooding, disasters, et cetera. So I think it's, you know, part of the political will to try to start thinking about that and incorporating that. You know, we've come over the hump of having less people say it's a hoax. Now we got to implement it and hardwire it. And then there's a lot of opportunity now with some of the things that were passed by the Biden administration last year. And so there's going to be some resources available from the federal government. And how do we learn more about tapping into those resources and putting them into effect?
You know, saying that, we have one of the greenest buildings in Philadelphia. We were the first one to get triple LEED neighborhood development that was in a transit oriented development and triple LEED. We have a blue roof, green roof. So if you're ever in Philadelphia, I would invite you to come and see what we have done there. But I mentioned that because it was this little Puerto Rican agency that had the first one in this country and the second one in the world. The first one was in China. But it is so important, and the reason that I'm bringing it up is that anyone that's doing development, I really encourage you to look at doing sustainable buildings and that are green. This was a $48 million project. It only cost us $250,000 in addition for the green elements that we put in there. That's not a whole lot for a $48 million project. And if a little nonprofit with no money and 21 funding sources to put this together can do it, you all that are for-profit can do it as well.
Now, I'm going to be your cheerleader on this one, because when the people started moving in, I had anecdotally a lady come up to me and said, I've just moved into these apartments from an old apartment, and my electricity bill is 10 times lower, because they built the apartments with low VOCs, high ratings, everything, the instant water heaters, granite countertops. So these were great apartments, and they were saving money. So, and one of the key things that I think that we need to really emphasize is whenever there's any kind of low-income housing, they need to include transportation as part of the apartment. So you can get on the bus for free if you live in these apartments. Thanks to Salvation Army, we had bus passes for the Hurricane Maria evacuees, because guess what? They couldn't drive here. Their cars had to stay over there because there's no way to get a car from the island. So they came in their winter Puerto Rican best, shorts and T-shirts. So we had to get clothing for them for Philadelphia winters, which I still hate. Texan through and through. So I'm not surprised to hear that they're moving to Texas, because that is closer to the temperature that they like.
Right. No, Nilda, that's amazing to think about the impact that APM has had in terms of development, and why it's important from a sustainability perspective to think about how to incorporate the aspects that you're talking about. And because it's such a long-term sustainable effort, the cost in the beginning is not that much, because it's going to pay dividends across the road. And then thinking about in what ways can businesses also collaborate, because there are so many nonprofits right now that are doing really incredible development work because of the housing crisis. Like, in what ways can businesses start to really think about this long-term preparedness thing? Is also like, if people need housing, and housing is probably the #1 issue when it comes to climate change at this moment. You know, it's one of the pieces that I know, Will, you touched on, like building in floodplains, right? The sort of environmental racism that comes with building in spaces for people that, you know, they shouldn't even be there in the first place. So how do we create opportunities for people to live safely and for businesses to have an impact in that process?
Engage. There's opportunities for businesses to be part of our advisory boards that communities have. Take leadership roles and making sure that policies are put into place that benefit the communities in which you live, especially around climate change. And join efforts, just like what Rick was saying. In his area, there's now a community, a co-ad, you call it, a community board that's looking at and thinking of this. Right now we're in deep need, all of us, including businesses, for talent. And so, just being part of the group in the beginning, you start developing those relationships, and then if a crisis comes, then those bridges and communication links are already established. But participate also in the political process. We just came off a big election. Don't want to be any partisan here, but a lot of things could be have been very different. But people participated. There was still a need for more participation, and so I say participate, and get engaged.
Housing, to me, housing is like the base for wealth building.
Yes.
And as employers, we all are having right now a shortage of employees. We were just talking with your CEO about that on our way here with Jorge. So I would encourage, there's different things you can do, from down payment assistance to helping some of these I would encourage all of your folks to go to housing counseling. When we had the housing crises, they blamed the low income, but I'll tell you that we did not have one foreclosure in that whole time in 2008 because we prepare our people. And also, when you're attracting employees, you might think of an employer assistance program as a benefit that you can also give some of your employees. I mean, we don't have a lot of money to be able to pay out, but sometimes that may not cost you a whole lot, but it'll mean the world to your staff by helping them with some kind of down payment assistance. Or there's so many ways that you can contribute, and whoever's doing housing in your local market, I would just talk to them, because every community has its own character. And for example, we're victims of our own success. We were in a neighborhood that nobody wanted to live in North Philly. You could take 76, you could take 95, never see our neighborhood. We started building, and now it's a neighborhood of choice. And it's gentrifying. There's no affordable housing, none. So we're trying to keep things affordable, and for that, it takes a lot of money to bring down the cost, or to bring down the cost to an affordable rate. And at some point, you try to plan, but you can't completely engineer a neighborhood. And at some point, they may be leaving us. And my colleagues and I have a very different philosophy. Some believe that they should give back. I believe that once they have that house and they build the equity, is theirs, and it starts building generational wealth. And I'm okay with that, because I'm a story of that, right? But for others, you want to keep it affordable, and there's land trust and other ideas, and they're all good, and they all work, and we need all those different philosophies in the neighborhoods. So I would talk to the local person and see what they're doing, but there's so many ways that you can help, and I think that's probably the best way that you can help a family. I always remember my mom gave me this advice. She says, Nilda, it's not what you make, but what you do with what you make. And she never made a lot of money, but we always owned our house and we always had a car. And it's really important that you learn how to invest. And I know we have a financial opportunity center where we teach people, the basics, and then how do you save. But those disciplines are really, really important. And I'm probably talking too much. If you want me to keep going.
No, it's an amazing story, right? And I think that it speaks to what some of the companies here and some CEOs that what they're thinking about in terms of what kinds of practices or policies would be helpful for them in terms of establishing generational wealth within their employee base. And so I appreciate you sharing that opportunity to think about it as an employer and why that was so powerful for you. I feel the same way. I think it's such an immense part of our stories when we're thinking about intergenerational wealth building and why homes are, at the crux of that. But I was gonna have Rick say, close out some
I would
words,
add daycare as well. but that's another story for another day. But that's to help, there's so many moms
Yeah.
they have children, and sometimes they're single parents. So that's another one to look at, but home ownership is really, really important.
Absolutely.
I think Will definitely hit the nail on the head when it's participation.
Participation.
A lot of companies will have their Latino Day, and the 364 other days, they think about their own business.
Right.
So
Right.
they need to be involved in the community that they're living in.
Yep.
They're part of that community as well. So they need to be part of the board, the school board. They need to be at the PTA meetings, whether they have children or not. They need to be in the meetings. They need to be helping the library, seeing if they need assistance, help sweeping the streets, the cobbles, cleaning up
Yep.
whatever you need to clean up.
Yep.
But make the community their own, not just we have our business here.
Yep.
And if they have they're going to buy a land for a factory, buy an extra acre and donate that extra acre to a nonprofit to build housing on. So it's a working together with your community and saying, yes, I'm ABC business, but I'm also Philadelphia. It's not just, I'm the business.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Rick, because I think it just speaks to the power of that collective, action and will. Like you were saying, it's about engaging, it's about participation, it's about making sure that you're all working together towards these common goals. And when you're engaged in the communities that you work and live in, then there's better opportunities to really hit and tackle some of these systemic issues that come up in those communities. I wanted to give some time for the audience to ask some questions. We wanted to make this a part of our conversation and see who had some questions that they wanted to ask. There's a microphone there on the right side. We can also bring it around to you. If you don't want to speak into the microphone, you can shout out your question to me. Please, Jorge.
Thank you so much, panel, for sharing your stories. And what I'm observing is just beautiful collaboration amongst your organizations. One of the things that we're talking a lot about at this conference with our businesses is how we work to build momentum for collective action. So you're an amazing model of that. Alongside that is racial solidarity. And so I'm curious, I think Nidia, Will, you spoke a little bit about, each of you spoke a little bit about the different crises, the waves of crises that we're facing. Climate, yes, also economic, also just public health crisis that is displacing people for all of these reasons. And we are in a moment where we have communities that are migrating from Puerto Rico, that are coming in from Venezuela, that are coming in from other states. How do you think about working with other organizations, and in what ways does racial solidarity inform the way that you approach your work?
Thank you, Jorge.
I was reading a report that Pew did about how different attitudes about that very subject. And depending on your background, you frame whether we are in a situation where we are in need of racial solidarity or not, and how to address that. And some folks are saying, we're close to the Supreme Court having a decision soon saying that we don't need affirmative action. And remember, affirmative action is not a preference for those who are unqualified. Affirmative action says there's 1,000 qualified people, there's only 100 seats, we're looking for diversity, right? So again, affirmative action is not, you're not gonna get somebody who doesn't know how to read and write to go to college. It is, these guys qualify, but there's only 100 seats. And then, the fact that you have Congress passing a law soon that says it's okay for interracial marriage. This is 2022, and they're gonna pass a law to make sure, because of that decision that was made recently at the court questioning whether, even interracial marriage is equal protection or whatever. It's just crazy. So I think the key is exchanging information, addressing the disinformation and misinformation that's going on. As small businesses, this has a racial equity component, people are going crazy about forgiving $10,000 in student debt after the PPP loans that we did. Come on. But you know what? The narrative is is not being controlled by common sense. It's being controlled by a few loudmouth people, and then that gets in the echo chamber of the media. Not against the media, but I'm just trying to say is that they get to sell their skewed view of what's going on. And so I think it's up to each one of us to participate in the dialogue, to make things known that of how we feel, and to say, you know, we believe that we need to have more racial equity. We believe that there's ways to address this. And we're not taking away anything from other people. It's just that we want a more level playing field. And I'm sure that there's more eloquent ways of explaining all this. But then the whole thing of trying to cover history too, the past. People are freaking out about teaching real history. They want to romanticize. So I think it's important, again, to engage, to participate, and to let your voices be known. We're a real threat of where we are with our democracy. I mean, it is very scary. We have now in a situation where there's very low opinion about the legislative branch, very low opinion about the executive branch, and now very low opinion about the judicial branch. You know who has a high rating in terms of confidence? The military, over 50%. That is scary. And so what I'm trying to say is, you know, we had a big election last midterms. Elections are every 6 months. We have a big one in Philadelphia coming up soon in the primary, but then there's another presidential election. And again, we have to get engaged. If we don't get engaged, the whole idea that, you know, just think about it. Climate change, a hoax. COVID, a hoax. All these other things, it's like, it's incredible. It's incredible. And we need to gain control of our country again. We need common sense.
And I would say that one of the pieces that is really prevalent in that is that by having racial solidarity and by working together to address these sort of overlapping crises, then we can establish a collective action among, you know, not just ourselves, but with other communities. And so there's opportunities for us to really engage together on a united front when it comes to how do we really address systemic issues by working together, participating together, and engaging in the work together. And I think that part of the examples that you shared in the work that you're doing is like, yes, this is for Puerto Ricanos, but you know, we have people migrating from different places that we have to provide support for. We have people coming from, you know, the African diaspora. We have, you know, we provide services to folks, so not me, they do. But there's a providing of services to folks who need those services, and that the organizations are predominantly Latino serving here, but that there are needs for folks that can be addressed in terms of racial solidarity so that everyone is getting included in the process and can also, we can activate together so that there are ways in which we can achieve the things that you're talking about, Will, so that we're not still in this position I'm gonna use 2035. Y'all know why I'm using 2035. But like in 2035, we're not still having these same conversations. But wanted to see if you wanted to add.
So APM, probably half of our clientele is African American. So we're very, and we have 18 different nationalities that work at APM. A lot of people don't know that. I think participation is really important. I think people get scared, especially, and I don't even like the term white people. I don't like black people, but I don't like white people either. I mean, oh man, that sounded awful. The term, when you call somebody white or you call somebody black. Jeez, oh my God.
Your COO is sweating right now.
He was our communications manager, and he would not allow me on Facebook when I was there. He says, you're not allowed. But, you know, I don't like those terms because I think the day we'll get to real equity is when we stop classifying people by the color of their skin or their accents or whatever. But to get to that, I think participation is so important so that people don't get scared. I think a lot of times they're scared. They look at many of the Puerto Ricans and Latinos. We haven't been in these high-powered positions, and will they be able to handle it? Will they be able, just because they don't know. But I think as as we get into conversations and you start hearing the solutions that we come up with, we're going to realize that what's good for Puerto Ricans and for Latinos and for African Americans, it's really good for the whole
everybody.
country.
Right.
And we're going to make this
Right.
country a lot stronger
Right.
if we're together and we can all participate in the coming of this, in
Yes.
our legislations.
Yes.
I think with the question of racial solidarity, the key point there is tolerance, and it's not being tolerant of the people you agree with. It's being tolerant of the people you don't agree with, and still being a solidarity with them as well. You know, like I mentioned earlier, there are many nonprofit organizations in Philadelphia that compete for the same dollar. And so, you know, they are in conflict with each other when it comes to getting money, but they are still going to be a solidarity when the hits the fan. When the blank hits the fan. So, but I think that's one of the key things with when you talk about racial solidarity. Not all Latinos are Democrat. Not all Latinos are Republican. Not all Latinos believe in God. Not all Latinos have any religion. So it's the tolerance of being able to look past your disagreements and work together on the things that you agree with.
Any other questions? Yeah, please, Kylie.
Thank you all so much. This is incredible, and thank you, Cynthia, for the vision and bringing this together. It's just unbelievable to see, and I appreciate all of you. My question is, we're talking about problems of incredible magnitude. I think we're all really sitting with that, the heaviness and the, timeliness of the climate crisis, all of this, all the disparity. I'd love to hear from each of you what motivates you to keep doing this work and what gives you the most hope.
Great question, Kylie.
That's, for me, it's easy. It's the next person walking through the door, because the crisis, the difficulties are huge. But for me, it's the next face that walks through the door. I learned their name, and now I'm helping that person. I don't think about, the overarching difficulty. I think about, I'm helping Juan today. I'm helping Juan at this moment because he needs the help, and that keeps me going.
What keeps me going, and it's funny because I just had a conversation with my niece about this. Today, it's kind of cool to be Latino and be brown skin, right? It wasn't so cool when I was growing up. You were called a spick. I was spit on. I mean, it was just, and then I knew I wanted to go to college because a friend in 6th grade told me that college was the place you went when you wanted to do better than your parents. So I said, I want to go to college. And then I'm in 11th grade and I have no idea. Nobody told me I have to take an SAT or what I need. There was like absolutely no guidance. I mean, a little Puerto Rican girl is not going to go to college. That was the assumption. So thank God for that, for Mr. Rivera. I went to Alney High School and he helped me, and I got into 3 colleges and I did very well, and here I am. So for me, I just want to provide that resource for our kids that I didn't have. But it was funny because I was told, that I needed to help when I came out of college, and I thought, I haven't even figured out life myself, and you want me to tell somebody else what to do? I have to make it myself, right? But now that I am in this position and that I have been able to help a lot of people and that I have, had all this success, I try to tell my kids and my niece, and they're like, I don't have anything important to say. They know it all. So I'm like, I don't know. Like, after all this, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's what motivates me, to be able to help others and to be that resource for those that people are just marginalizing and putting aside, because I know how that feels.
The helping others, I think, because I was helped. And when you think about it, we were all helped.
Yeah.
As recently as maybe 20 years ago, I mean, we don't have wires we're wireless here. I mean, that's just on technology, on communication. But in terms of human rights, I mean, one of my favorite cases in law school was a Supreme Court decision that came out in the late 1800s proving that women could not be lawyers. Right now, there's more women enrolled in law school, more women enrolled in college, more women enrolled in med school, but this progress, and I feel like it was given to us. We got to carry it now and carry it forward. Yes, it will sometimes slip out of our collective hands and fall, almost did, happened in Germany very horrendously, right? But just, to me, it's just like, hey, we're passing this along, and what's going to be better for our kids from technology-wise to human rights-wise to democracy-wise. And so the 2016 and the last few years have been really tough. But I think all of us have found ways to get that last bit of strength to keep it going.
Yeah.
And now, we still got big challenges, and climate change is going to be one of the big ones. So, and it's great to see the focus of this event, talking about climate change among businesses, et cetera, because now you'll be able to carry that forward and help spread information, correct information to get us to a good place moving forward in the future.
Yeah.
The future is what
The
gets me
future.
going.
I would say, I mean, I'll answer the question for myself as well. I mean, the future is the most important piece. Like, I want to leave this planet to my children, right? And having children is an existential crisis in and of itself, right? Because you're just like, wait a second. They're in 30 years, my kids are going to have kids and they're going to be living on this planet. What is it going to look like? How's it going to feel, right? And I think that just echoing like your stories, right? Being a Black Latina PhD and the rarity of my journey of being able to have people pull me up and then pulling people up behind me is also like, I have to pull up my children now and I have to think about what is this world going to look like and what is the impact of their lives and their livelihood in this current environment. And so how do we find ways to really continue being hopeful in this sort of doom and gloom circumstance, especially when the media is perpetuating so many different ideas about what it means to be in this, where we are right now, which is very contradictory to what people believe. So like you were saying, there's a lot of issues with what people are understanding as the current reality. And I think that by painting the picture of what actually disaster relief on the ground looks like, it was eye-opening for me when I heard all of the logistical things that needed to take place just to support people in surviving a climate disaster. And that was scary, right? That knowing that process, understanding all that y'all had gone through to make this happen was scary. And it was like, wait, this is the world that we're passing on to our children, where we have to like do these major efforts and that people's lives are sort of disintegrated in 1 second because of the environment, right? And so how do we continue to understand that there is a future that we want to see and that our children are going to be a part of that, and even if you don't have children, other people's children, right? Our collective children. And that this is an opportunity for us to change the tide so that in 30 years, they're not still in this position, right? We also don't want status quo. It needs to get better. We can't maintain things the way that they are. We need things to improve. And so just keeping that hope, because I want them to enjoy things that we've enjoyed and for them not to be experiencing the things that we're currently going through. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Any other questions? No?
I heard you mention a couple times a couple different states and some of the differences, in accessing money and things like that. I was wondering if you've made any partnerships with other states or you've been able to share your success.
Great question.
Yeah, we have. So the fiscal, we started working on Puerto Rico with the fiscal crises, and when that happened, we were trying to see if there were any national organizations that could help, and people are scared. Puerto Rico is complicated, and the political situation is complicated. And when you're not Puerto Rican, well, when we are Puerto Rican from the diaspora and we try to get in, it's really hard. When you're not Puerto Rican and you try to help, it gets 10 times harder. So people are afraid. Like other Latino agencies are afraid because of everything that happens. So anyway, that we decided to, we started the National Puerto Rican Agenda. And that has a coalition of 10 different states. And there's and the most active one, by the way, is Pennsylvania. But there's chapters in New York and New Jersey and other areas. So that's one coalition. The other one was the Greater Philadelphia Yeah, the Philadelphia long-term recovery, and then he just reminded me that we have Unidos Pa PR. And by the way, that's a play on word, because it's PA for Pennsylvania and PR for Puerto Rico. But we always, I guess like Jamaicans like cut their words, Puerto Ricans do the same in Spanish. So instead of para, we say pa, voy pa'lante, I'm going forward. So we put United for Puerto Rico, so Unidos Pa PR. So it's a play on that, Pennsylvania and Puerto Rico.
But there's also Unidos US, which is a huge organization. I don't know if I understood your question as working.
No, what coalitions came as a result
okay,
of
as a
this?
Other
result,
states.
okay.
Oh, and then the one we're part of SEBA, and in that group is the
Latino Equitable
Latino
Development Coalition.
Income Development, Economic Development Corporation, which he leads, and it's a collective of all the Latino community development organizations here in Philadelphia, and we work really well together.
Yeah, I think again, collaboration is going to be key because it's, there's economies of scale with collaboration. And obviously, this is a collaboration, the B Corp, right? It's a group. How you can work in unison and how do you get moving forward, I think is important because we're going to have to figure out how to do more with less. Because I think climate change is also going to cause some scarcity, and of resources and opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the key is how do you do more with less, and that's by working together and getting those economies of scale.
We have time for one more question. Yeah.
So when you were talking about, like, if folks are going, so I'm obviously from the Philly area, but if folks are going back home and they don't know where to go, like, is it typical that a county government would have a disaster preparedness? Like, where might folks start to look for the people that are doing that work?
So I have to repeat the question. So in terms of looking for support, do county governments have the resources to, and is that where you access support and resources?
Or like building those connections?
Or building the connections between the organizations? I will just say that I know for a fact that Montgomery County, I don't know how it works in Philadelphia because Philadelphia is a lot bigger, but in Montgomery County there is a climate preparedness strategy where they're trying to establish a network of organizations that are thinking about how to connect with each other and to fill in the gaps when it comes to disaster relief. So that's something that is sort of occurring in Montgomery because of the recent climate crises that they've experienced and the level of impact that it's had on their communities. And so the county the government is trying to create this strategy so that they can have folks plugged in or organizations plugged in different ways. And then that network is activated once a disaster strikes. But if you could speak to, I think that's like the greater Philadelphia long-term recovery, yeah.
But for those that are from other states, I think that the question, how other states, I think your best bet is to Google your county and disaster relief and see what comes up. And if nothing comes up, then it's now your job to start it.
Yep.
You don't have well, let's see who else is doing it and then forget about it. If you've done the effort to look it up, now it's your job to call a second organization, say, come on, let's start this. Call up your county commissioner or your mayor and say, we're starting this. We need you to bring people together.
Yeah.
That's all it takes.
Yep.
The first group to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take a step. And have other people step with you.
And I think that every locality has a FEMA-like office. So like there's PEMA, Pennsylvania Emergency, and in Philadelphia there's the Office of Emergency Services. So I think that every state probably has that, and that might be a good place to start as well.
Yeah, and I think every responsible government has contingency plans. What are they? And it may be something that that you could again look up and see what those plans are and what the structures are, and figure it out, and then prepare. I think we've seen that now we got to really prepare for all types. The winter's coming here. We'll have that snowfall. Shut down for a day or two, maybe more. But just again, prepare.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, you guys are leaders here, and if you're leaders without willing to make a call to somebody else, you're just a person taking a walk.
Mm-hmm. And then I think that one of the pieces that is a national thing is VOAD is national, and so they may not have presence in every single county, but there's an opportunity to build presence in different counties that I think that they're interested in doing. And so you can always contact National VOAD, and I know that they do have a website, and they're the ones that organize all of the volunteer organizations together. So they'll bring in the Red Cross, they'll bring in the Salvation Army, they'll bring in organizations that are locally that are doing that work, and they'll work with FEMA and any state emergency management. But VOAD is always looking for people to volunteer, and they don't have that. They're missing people to co-chair specifically for your individual counties or specific to your city. And I think that they come in, and what they want is for people to already be established so that they can bring the infrastructure, but that the trust building is already there. Because what happens is a disaster hits, and then they're trying to communicate with people who they've never had relationships with, and people are not getting services, people are not getting housing, people are not getting federal funding, they can't fill out their paperwork. And so if there are individuals who are interested in really contributing to these efforts, and I'm saying this for the virtual audience too, because it can happen anywhere, then I think that it's an important way for you to get plugged in so that people are established on the ground when disaster strikes, especially in your own backyards, because this will continue to happen, and it will happen closer to home. And many of you have companies that are in different places, but it could impact your employees. It could impact the communities that you serve. And so what are some ways in which you can already be plugged in so that you have that relationship established, and then it's easier for these organizations to come in and do this incredible work and be really effective at doing the work, and that people are not going without services. Because there are people that have spent months from Hurricane, I think it was Hurricane Irma, or not Hurricane Irma, the last one, what was the one? Fiona. The one before that. See? Yep. There was the one before Fiona, they spent 8 months in hotels in Montgomery County, living in hotels for 8 months. Thankfully, the hotels were like, let's be a part of this process. We're gonna contribute our resources as hotels and allow people to stay at our locations. But there's an element of preparedness that needs to happen so that people could get the services that they need, because we are talking about humanity at work. This is an important element of the climate disaster response. So I just wanted to say thank you to our panelists, to Rick, to Nilda, to Will. Thank you for all of your hard work, and thank you all for joining us today.